Hello and welcome to Mytech U for February 2018, where today we are going to be talking about, if you're tired of security scare tactics, 5 ways to empower and protect your team. It's been a key initiative for Mytech to put this program together that we're going to talk about today. But the main thing that we see going on in the industry, and we feel that there's a general apathy sometimes around all the security noise that's out there. It just seems like the world is full of a lot of security scare. Let's scare you into saying you need more security, but yet we're not having any answers. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So today I am pleased to be joined by our presenters, Gerald Howland and Leif Wildenberg. But before we get going and before I hand the presentation over to them, I definitely wanted to remind everyone that in your GoToMeeting control panel, there is a question pane. And if you have any questions, by all means, interject via the questions, and we will either answer them offline or we will interject them into the conversation. So with that said, thank you very much for joining us today. It is being recorded. And so let me start by, as I mentioned, scare tactics, blah, blah, blah. Again, we just felt that was something that we were hearing from our clients and the small business community. And today, we're here to give you answers, more than just scaring, but educating and providing answers so that those scary, newsworthy events that happen, you don't have to be scared of, and you know that your business is protected with these programs. So that said, Gerald, I'm going to hand it over to you as you dig into 5 ways to empower and protect your team. Do you want to give a brief summary here?
Yeah, so when we look at the 5 ways to kind of protect and empower your team, we really are looking at multiple different kind of building these layers and utilizing different functions. So we have the traditional security layers, you know, your antivirus, your firewalls, those kinds of things, but then also adding on different features that actually empower your users to be more knowledgeable about the solutions that they're doing and the security risks, protecting them against those advanced threats using advanced technologies. And then, you know, when bad stuff happens, because honestly, bad stuff does happen, making sure that we can recover and we can protect that data as necessary. And then even how to take that to the next level, utilizing like our SecureWorker Plus package.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that Gerald, from a philosophical or conceptual level, we are working to take the approach and presume that there will be a breach, right? Instead of hoping and crossing our fingers that nothing bad's ever going to happen, we're actually, the approach of this program and what we're going to cover today is that we're presuming that something bad will happen, but we're putting ourselves in a position and our clients in a position to be able to recover from that no matter what. So, yep. Very good. All right, so let's start with traditional security layers. I think it's important to note some of these, and I'll just touch on this one, and then Gerald, you please explain the rest. But you know, the traditional security layers, the reason why I say traditional, I didn't want to say legacy because it's not outdated. But these practices haven't changed a whole heck of a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. And I think we can all agree that the technology world has changed almost infinitely more complex in the last 10, 15 years, but the core security practices haven't. So I don't know, Gerald, can you at least hit on that and explain why it's still important?
Yeah, so these same technologies, you know, you have to keep them updated. You have to keep them, you know, moving forward and you know, using modern technologies, but they're still the same things that we've been relying on for many, many years. So things like spam filters, the firewalls, making sure that we're doing the patches, we're mitigating what kind of risks we actually do out there. You know, everybody needs antivirus. You still need to have that kind of stuff. These are really the critical layers that are part of this environment, but you know, how we actually, you know, what we're finding is that the bad guys are using more than just this. You know, they're getting around these tools, and so how do we protect these more from what we're dealing with? You know, how can we add a level of protection above what this is doing, and that really is kind of the focus of what we're talking about next.
Yeah, Gerald, I think one of the things that you said, hackers are getting around these tools, and also the technologies we use or the solutions that we all use, working from coffee shops or home or using online portals and SaaS applications. Some of those new technologies, these tools can't even protect you against. So hackers are actually learning how to exploit those as well. And so the traditional models just really don't work anymore. Well, they still work for the foundation, but they don't cover all of the different threat vectors, if you will, that exist today. And so we believe it's important that there's more that's necessary to really moving forward. So, okay, Leaf, I'll also pause. Any comments before we move on to introducing the majority of the presentation here in the next slide?
Nope, I think you guys are covering good.
All right. So, as we said, they are no longer enough. All right. So, we are introducing Mytech Secure Worker and our Secure Worker Plus program. This has a brief summary, and we're going to go into all these details here throughout the presentation. But I think the important thing that we'd really like to note is that Mytech's Secure Worker program is an innovative solution from our research that no other managed service provider or IT services provider is offering a bundle that's as comprehensive as this, that builds as much value, for our clients from a price point that's extremely affordable. We investigated how much it would, if you went to buy all these things a la carte to try and put these pieces together, it would be 3 to 10 times the cost if you try to do this on your own on our research. So we're excited about that. And again, as Gerald mentioned earlier, this program is really unique in the fact that it combines education to empower your team, additional security to protect your team and your technology workers, as well as providing really individual-based backup service. This program is really focused, it protects your business. It's really designed to be focused on your workers, your people, your team. So these are individual-based backup services that can always recover your workforce. So I think that's one of the things that's different about, well, what's the traditional layers are really focused, I think, on protecting the business and the core business, while as this is actually working and focused specifically on securing your team and your people. All right, any other comments before, Gerald, we go into the next one? I'll hand it over to you.
Sounds good.
All right, so we start here, Gerald. Let's start off with the empower.
So empowering. So part of the focus of this security package is to do, like Nate, you were just saying, this is really about the user now. They're the biggest risk to our security environment, and so how can we empower our users to be smarter about security, less risky about what they're clicking on, what kinds of emails they're actually looking at. CEO fraud is a huge deal right now. Credential stealing is a huge deal right now, and they're all done by starting off by doing phishing and spear phishing, all these bad terms that we've been hearing out there. So security awareness training. Let's actually train our users, our executive staff, all of that kind of stuff to make sure that everybody is aware of what kinds of things to look for. What is a bad link? What are all these bad things? What should we put out there? What should we not put out there? So let's train them on that kind of stuff, and then let's start doing some phishing. Let's actually poke them. Let's see if they can click on those messages. Can they identify a bad message versus a good message? Can they do those kinds of things? Because if they're getting those messages, we see it on a regular basis where people are clicking on those and having their credentials stolen. That happens, and so how can we protect ourselves against that is really the kind of the key focus of that. So really focusing on, as we're listing some of our courses here, things that we can focus on, the avoiding the hackers, the phishers, social media type things, what information to put out onto your Facebook page, what information not to put on your Facebook page. There's a lot of risky information out there. Hey, I'm going on vacation is an amazing thing. You want all your friends to know that you're going to the latest tropical holiday as I'm looking out outside at all the snow. That'd be awesome, right? But then also people now know that to not only potentially breach your accounts or attempt to breach your accounts because they know you aren't using them on a regular basis, but even personally, now they know your house is also Bankit. Is that adding additional risk? So a lot of communication around how we can do some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Gerald, could you also touch on, I think that many regulated industries also, this is kind of now a requirement, not just a nice to have, a need to have.
Yeah, so, when we're looking at stuff like HIPAA or PCI, if you do anything in the European areas where we're going to have to deal with GDPR, there's a lot of risk type scenarios that are coming up out there. We've got content around some of that kind of stuff. Now, our HIPAA content is not like HIPAA certification, but it is really defined around kind of that continuing knowledge of what is and is not to be said out there, those kinds of things.
All right, very good. So that's the first aspect of the Empower. Let's move on to the second.
Yeah, so one of the other things that's kind of a big deal out there, and this is less security based, but even just empowering our users to be more productive in the way that they use the tools and using the tools that we want them to use. So we're actually throwing in a training-based system that teaches you about your typical Office applications, your O365 applications, how to use those kinds of things better, more efficiently. Full training that just kind of gets you through all of that stuff. Everybody kind of says, well, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is there's a lot of risk out there. In fact, I was out on a website the other day where I actually looking for a simple Excel query. I thought, hey, this looks like a nice safe site until I tried to install malware on my computer. If we can minimize the interaction that everybody has to do, and we can provide them with a known safe site to actually see that information, this is what we're trying to do. So they're nice, quick little training programs, but they do offer a lot of very good knowledge.
Gerald, I think another thing here is with a lot of the advancements with the O365 Office Suite, a lot of people are going out and trying to find templates and samples of information to be able to use those new features. And we're seeing a lot more of where people are downloading Excel templates or Word templates that have macros embedded in them that have the malicious software out there. It's a new vector that is heavily being utilized today. So instead of having people search for a template that might already be there, teaching them how to use the tool so that they don't expose themselves to a Word or an Excel or a PowerPoint document that is already infected.
Well, and the other thing I think that's been, that we've seen is that going back 10, 15 years, as organizations and businesses first, started getting off of their AOL and Yahoo email accounts and getting their corporate email accounts, that's really when, the using Outlook and shared calendars and contacts and just some of the ways in which businesses have used Outlook, in particular in Office, for the last 10 or 15 years, well, it's now changing. And so some of the same tool sets that people have been used to, well, now Microsoft has been releasing new and different applications via Office 365, such as Teams and Planner and Forms and Flow, and just other programs that no one has even really heard of. And so part of this is also being able to educate your team on some of the new technology that's coming out, and having award-winning, quality, approved training content available to their fingertips, which of course we hope improves employee productivity, which is what we all want as well. So, all right, any final thoughts before we move on to the next layer of protect? Hearing none. Gerald, take it away.
Okay, protection. So we've actually got several areas of protection that we're adding in. The first area is DNS filtering. So for those of you who don't know what DNS is, I am going to give the very, very, very high level of overview on this, but it is basically the phone book of the internet. So it translates that wonderful name of www.google.com to what it actually means, or what servers actually go talk to for that. So one of the cool parts about that is because we're actually looking at the information at that very high level, we can immediately block things that are going to malicious sites. So everything that you do basically on the web based around DNS, we're looking at all of it. So the filtering system that we utilize over the first 13 days of this month filtered just for our clients like 74 million lookups. Of those 74 million lookups, we blocked 100,000 attempts to go to sites that were serving malicious information or bad sites, those kinds of things. So really trying to block those kinds of traffic at a very high level to kind of keep that information from happening. The cool part about this system is it actually looks at all those queries, automatically determines what the risk levels are, and then creates sites that are or database listings of what sites are serving out malware are based upon what they call command and control servers. So the sites that the malicious hackers use to actually maintain and control all of their viruses that are out there. It blocks access to a lot of that kind of stuff. So really some huge benefits to using it. Now, the bad guys are always changing the ways that they're doing things, so they sneak around, but this is just one of those layers that we try to put in place.
Gerald, the most of the ransomware to date, I know it's changing, is really using that command and control callback. It's one of their key vectors, right?
Yeah, so the command and control callback is a huge deal right now because it is kind of helping block some of that ransomware stuff. Now the bad guys are getting smarter about that, and they're actually putting in kind of safe modes. So even if it can't call back, it still it tries for so long, and then it automatically starts just doing malicious things because they know that you're trying to do this kind of stuff. So you still want to protect yourself from other things. It's not the end-all be-all solution. But one of the things that we've actually been seeing a higher percentage of lately is actually what they call JavaScript Bitcoin mining. So you visit a website that you didn't realize had this on it, and all of a sudden all of your CPU resources are being utilized to mine Bitcoin for other companies. Obviously, we don't like that. You don't like it because your PC gets slow and you don't know why. But that's happening out there, and this system is actually blocking against that. In fact, we had, I think in the numbers that we pulled in the first 13 days of this month, we had several hundred attempts that were blocked by doing this. So it's kind of exciting that we're actually saving that from our customers.
Yeah, and I think the important thing, this is a great illustration, Gerald, of how the type of threats are changing, and the fact that that type of exploit, what you just mentioned, as far as using your CPU resources or your computer's resources to mine for Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, is nothing that an antivirus product would catch, because it's being executed through a web browser that you're thinking is a perfectly fine web site, but yet it's usually being fed through an ad or something that's there peripherally. It's not even really why you're going to the site, and hackers are now using that as an attack vector. So it's your standard traditional models wouldn't even stop against that, wouldn't protect you against that threat.
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Yeah, and so final little trivia. I know you mentioned those numbers, Gerald, like 74 million web requests, and we blocked over 100,000 of those just in the first 13 days of this month. I like to put that in percentages because I think it is good to note that even though that percentage is over 99.8% of good, the reality is just over 1% of bad across our client base was still over 100,000 total malicious activities happening. So, and that's just in just under a 2-week period of time. So it's only this is really catching the 1 to 2% of bad that's out there, but just because of the sheer volume of internet connections and how we all use the internet, it's from a quantity perspective, it's really significant. All right, let's hit on mobile device management, Gerald.
So, as everybody knows, we all use our mobile devices to access our mail, different corporate data. What we want to look at, though, is when we start talking about mobile device management, is how can we protect our corporate data and not really worry about the personal data that might be on phones. Traditional mobile device management solutions require it's either either going to the level where all the data is controlled and you can't use the phone for personal use, or it's the other way where I can send a command to wipe the device, but when I send the command to wipe the device, it wipes all the personal data also. So what we're driving towards is we're driving towards putting in a data containerization to drive the use of like the Microsoft Outlook app and some other tools, so that all of the corporate data is inside of a lock set of applications that can be uniquely identified and wiped as necessary. So either on an employee leaving a company, or theft or loss of a device, those kinds of things, we can proactively destroy the corporate data on those devices without having to worry about the risk associated with the user's personal data getting lost also.
Yeah, and there's some simple policy-based decisions to understand how you may want to enforce some of these some additional layers. Again, as we mentioned, like enforce like PIN control or password or things like that, as well as just whether or not you allow devices or certain types of devices. So it's definitely a nice additional layer to help not only protect yourself, but also to help protect your employees from their own personal data being deleted in the event of a mobile device policy that passed.
Yeah, we want to make sure that corporate data is always secured. So the passwords, those kinds of things, we just need to make sure everybody is abiding by the rules that we set forth. And this kind of stuff helps manage that information.
All right, so this one is, we get asked about this a lot, and there's some ways in which we can help, and Microsoft's done a great job of enabling this across all different types of mobile device platforms. So we can definitely dig in there more. But this next one, Gerald, is one that I think is one of the coolest and most unique parts of this offering that is not really being utilized at all out in the world today. So can you dig into what do we mean by the Protect module of intelligent threat detection?
So intelligent threat detection, we'll start with a typical antivirus looks at files on your computer and tries to compare them against either a database of known bad files, or they compare it against a database of what kinds of actions that program does that are bad. What our intelligent threat detection does, though, that's very unique, is it actually looks at the ways that hackers lock themselves onto a computer. So a hacker or a bad, any kind of malicious actor is trying to gain access to your computer, and once they gain access to your computer, they want to make sure that they stay on your computer, right? Through a reboot, through a patch cycle, through whatever happens, they want to make sure that they're always on your computer. And so what our system does is it actually looks at all of those little ways that they lock themselves in, which there are hundreds of thousands of ways that happen across the Windows computer. They look at all of those, and they look at all of those files, and then they basically compare it to known databases of information and good old manual labor. If it's something that's known, they can say it's good or bad. They automatically flag it, and it's treated that way. But if it's something that they haven't seen before, it's not a computer trying to determine information. They're actually manually going through that file, comparing it to other pieces of information, looking at what the script is doing all that kind of stuff. So there's an actual security operations center of human beings doing things. And then as they determine that risk level, they either say this is bad or good, and then we take the appropriate remediation steps to remove that bad stuff. Kind of a cool side point of that is they can also, because we're not determining whether or not it's fully good or bad, we can also determine this is potentially unwanted. So things that could be like adware, there's like the coupon bar or all these other tools that might be tracking your web traffic or serving out ads that could potentially produce malicious activity. We can also identify those kinds of things and flag those for removal also. So what's really kind of neat about this is that we've actually, because there's humans involved, we've been able to catch things before, catch like ransomware before it actually gets infected. It's not it's not just a system that's trying to, no antivirus product is catching these things, and we can identify them before they actually happen, which is kind of the exciting part of the process.
Yeah, Gerald, just some trivia on that. We actually looked at this, and you mentioned the potentially unwanted programs. we actually were able to identify a handful of those programs that, like you said, they might not necessarily be doing anything malicious, but they're typically performance degradation or other issues that just aren't really quality programs, to get rid of those. So we were able to remove some of those, and this is just in the first couple of weeks of this trial here. We also, you mentioned ransomware. We actually prevented 2 different ransomware events where ransomware was able to bypass everything, but we were able to stop it before it actually encrypted the device, so that we were able to prevent that person. And one of the instances, I like to tell this story, one of the instances where the Security Operations Center identified it, they actually worked with our on-call engineers. They said, hey, if we don't take action on this right now, someone's going to come in tomorrow morning and they're going to have their device is going to be encrypted, and we were able to stop that. And then the last thing I think that was interesting from a trivia perspective, and Gerald, I'd like you to elaborate on this a little bit, is that we identified 8 zero-day threats that bypassed all other traditional security measures. So Gerald, I want you to elaborate on that, but I want to put it in perspective. One of the reasons why this component of the Secure Worker program is so critical is that there are millions of new threats that come out every year. And when we've done the math on those, that's somewhere in the ballpark. This year is estimated to be somewhere in the ballpark of 8 to 10 new threats per second that are being identified out in the wild. And so even if your current security, you have all this stuff in place, chances are with just the sheer volume of new vulnerabilities and threats that are out there, something is going to get through because it's brand new. So Gerald, could you talk about a little bit about those, how you recognize the 0-day, or how how it caught those?
Yeah, so our Security Operations Center, as part of the process that they do, they actually they run those files when they try to determine whether or not they're good or bad. They run them through a series of checks. One of them checks it against hundreds of antivirus products out there, and determines kind of a score as to what all those antivirus products determine. And what we found is that 8 of these products, or 8 of these issues that were found in the first couple of weeks here, really nothing detected it as a virus, even though they were trying to take malicious actions. Some of them are as simple as a PowerShell script that is set up to run in the background and regularly attempt to download a malicious file. That's a slick way for a hacker to try to gain access and keep access to that system, because if that runs, they can always be modifying something to try to get that 0-day in. Most antivirus products don't see that as a threat because it's not actually doing anything malicious until it tries to download something. But our system does detect that kind of action and says, hey, this is something that's bad running in the background. We need to get that removed from the system. So it's a huge deal to be able to catch that stuff before it happens, because that's how you keep yourself from actually getting those active, whether it's a ransomware or a data breach of any kind. Stopping it at the first detection is always critical.
All right, so we want to spend a little more time on this one, just because it is one of the more unique components of this program, and it's critical. It's kind of as the last line of defense, but we do need to move on. So Gerald, can you take it off and talk about a little bit about one of the other components we built in, which is hard drive destruction, why we don't want to overlook that piece?
Yeah, so a lot of people actually don't really think about this. They think that just because I deleted all the data on my computer means that it's safe, and that's not necessarily the truth. There are ways of retrieving data even after it's been deleted, and even some of the really bad people out there are figuring out ways of doing that even more. And so for a long time, there was always this term called dumpster diving, where you're going through a business's dumpster to find business data on paper. Well, this is the electronic version of that. Trying to find those hard drives, going to various computer recycling centers, that kind of stuff, finding hard drives that have been used before, and then buying them or taking them as part of a recycling program to use that data. We want to make sure that data is gone completely. So we are actually working with our recycling system to actually not only on our premise physically damage the drive so it's unreadable anymore, but then also taking it that step further, making sure our recycling partner actually shreds that drive, fully destroys it, doing all of that kind of stuff. So from the day that drive, when we go to recycle that drive for whatever reason it might be, either because it fails or because it's a computer you're replacing, we can just easily, using a device that physically damages that drive, so all that data is unreadable at that point, till it can be securely recycled. So.
All right, very good. Again, that's a minor detail, but it's an important one because, like I said, these are methods that are being used to gain access to information. So, well, that covers the 4 key components of the protect module. Let's move on to, again, the presumed breach. So something bad is going to happen. So how do we make sure that we can recover you? So let's start with the O365 backup, Gerald.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't realize this, but O365 is not backed up. The data is stored in a way that it's highly resilient. So the chance of data loss in Microsoft's world is pretty much non-existent. But if something were to ever happen, whether it's through data breach or cryptoware, even internal employee maliciously deleting or accidentally deleting data, there's no real way of looking at that data over a long period of time. And so our Office 365 recovery tool takes snapshots of that data 3 times a day, securely stores it up on a set of servers that gives us the ability to return that data at any point in time. So now we can easily say, 2 years later, hey, remember there was this file out there that somebody lost or they set a password on it, we forgot the password. We can now go back into those archives and actually restore that data, and be able to do that over a period of time. In fact, this is actually becoming a huge deal because there's a kind of a malicious piece of malware going around right now. It's actually a website that tricks you into clicking. And then once you click on the link, it automatically activates against your O365 mailbox and encrypts all of the data inside your mailbox. The methodology that it uses to encrypt that data does it in such a way that there is no way of actually restoring that information back without a feature like this. So this is becoming more and more of a useful tool if something like that ever happens.
Well, Gerald, I think the other thing that's important to mention about that is that as we mentioned in the beginning, how new there are new areas that we need to cover, right? So Office 365 wasn't previously a typical area that we had to worry about, not only from a backup perspective, but from a protection perspective. And what you just described, from my understanding, is that all these other security measures that you have in place won't even stop that from happening. They won't even recognize it as a problem because it's hitting O365 directly, not actually anything on your machine that could be stopped by your antivirus tool or stopped by any of the tools we have available today. So your only protection against it really is having a backup that you can recover.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. They are fooling you into clicking on a valid link that is actually taking the actions. It's not, you really have to look at the fine print as to what's happening before clicking, and that's the risk of what this helps mitigate.
All right, so that's one of the backups, and this next one I'm excited about because I want to, before I hand it over to you, Gerald, I want to ask the audience to just at least internally ask themselves this question: do you always, and I want you to virtually raise your hand, do you always save every document on the server all the time, or do you ever have a document that's ever offline on your local machine where you're just starting it out and working on it before you actually get it into a place where it's backed up? So I'll just pause to let you think about that. Because when I've asked this question of in-person audiences, nearly every hand goes up. So that's one of the reasons why we're rolling this out, is because while we know everyone's been told for more than a decade at least, if not a couple decades now, save your documents to the server because that's where we're being backed up. Well, here's something that we can share. So Gerald, can you elaborate on this component?
Yeah. So I know I've been through this. My laptop died, just at the beginning of this week personally. And I lost some documents that I didn't back up. And because of that, we're wanting to make sure that we catch all of those kinds of things. So we've got a tool that we're releasing that backs up the key document formats. So the critical Office docs, your Word docs, your PowerPoint presentations, that Excel budget you've been working on, those kinds of things, backs those up on a regular basis from your computer and uploads them to the cloud. And the advantage of doing that is no matter where you're at, as long as you have some internet access, that information's getting sent up and retained to give us that recovery. So if your laptop all of a sudden dies, lost, stolen, whatever it might be, that information is recoverable to another system. So it goes across the entire PC. It looks at all documents, or I should say, it looks at all of the primary Office documents, so your Word docs, PowerPoint files, PDF files, some of that kind of stuff. I do want to point out it does not do, two areas that we hear about a lot for wanting to back up are photos. It does not back up photos. It does not back up CAD files. We do have a solution for that kind of stuff that is beyond the scope of this, but this really is meant to just kind of capture some of those key files that we all forget about all the time, that we just save to our desktop, or we have on our laptop when we're traveling, and then all of a sudden we lose our laptop, or we drop it and it breaks and we lose that data. This helps us protect ourselves against that.
Yeah, so I think that's what's great about the Gerald is it's the common files that we all are most like. I mean, I say we all, I'm generalizing, but when we polled folks in general, we all forget about that. And sometimes it's not a matter of forgetting, but like you said, it's something where the reality is I'm working remotely, I'm traveling, and so I'm working on a plane, and I forget, I don't back it up right when I get to my hotel room or something like that. So it's something where this helps protect ourselves from ourselves and be able to recover if something bad happens. Again, presume something bad's going to happen and put ourselves in a position to recover regardless. Okay, so that really hits on the middle kind of three layers: the empower, protect, and recover. So we've hit on 4 layers so far. We've got one last layer to really hit on, which is the Secure Worker Plus section of program, which one of the reasons why this is a plus is because it does require an additional subscription to Microsoft Azure AD Premium to enable all this functionality that we're going to talk about. But this is the 5th way in which we believe you should empower and protect your workers moving forward. So, Gerald, as we dig into that, let's hit on the first one there, the single sign, the first empower function, which is the single sign-on function. Talk about that, please.
Yeah. So single sign-on. This is a really cool feature that there's thousands of predefined and even more that are potentials that utilize a way of doing central authentication called SAML, or Secure Authentication and Markup Language. And what it does is it's a way of using your corporate username and password to log into other sites. So like I know I use my personal username and password that I have the same username and password that I log into my PC with. I can log into multiple of Mytech's tools. And if you wanted to do that, that'd be awesome for you to be able to do it as well. The advantage of doing that kind of stuff is, it's a single portal. We can go on to this one page. It lists all the sites that automatically let us log in using that username and password. We can control access to those applications via groups. So we can say that these users have access to these apps, but not these apps, and vice versa. And there's a lot of, this is kind of a growing area of web-based application when you start getting into, your cloud-based apps. How do I, instead of having 12 different usernames and passwords, I can keep it down to that single username and password that gains me access to all those sites.
And part of this also, the reason why we put it in the Empower section is because it really makes it easier for your staff, right? It's easier for them to navigate these different applications, to have a password policy that can be enforced across all these applications that adheres to your corporate policy. So it basically makes it, empowers your staff to be able to work and be more productive because they're not having to remember different ones, and it's integrated with everything they're already doing. So that's a big one from the Empower perspective. All right, what about the next one, Gerald, from Empower, the self-service password reset?
Well, self-service password reset, I mean, that pretty much explains it right there. I know I will hate to admit this, but I forgot my password before. I forgot my password on multiple sites. I've even forgot my work password before. And so, you know, how do I get that? Normally that's a call to, you know, the IT department or to us or to whoever it might be to get that kind of information reset. But if that's something that I can easily go out onto a certain portal and using that information, using that portal that, you know, access or verifies that information, either through a series of questions or SMS texts or various methodologies that it can utilize, I can reset my password anytime, any way. Nobody else has to get involved. Kind of a strong benefit to our internal staff.
Yeah, it just enables you to, especially, of course, you know, when people forget their passwords, Murphy's Law would state that it's after hours, on a weekend, early in the morning, you know, sometime that's really inconvenient, and your IT support might not even be available or be inconvenient. So it's something where you can do on your own. So very good. All right, so that covers the two components of the Empower Plus section. So let's move on to the Protect and talk about multi-factor authentication. So Daryl, to start, why is it multi-factor versus just two-factor? Can you talk about that?
Well, because so when we talk about multi-factor, we talk about having something and knowing something. So that's kind of like the minimum level. But when we start talking about multi-factor, it is more than two. So a lot of times the modern day multi-factor is actually pushing towards using an app on your phone, something like that. And then as long as your phone is now secured, it's something you have to secondarily authenticate towards and know your password out on the internet. So it's almost a 2 or 3 level authentication when you start looking at it. So there's really kind of a mixture of things. We also have the second factor doesn't have to be a single type of factor. We can have multiple layers of factors that we can utilize. So it can be anything from an SMS to an app to a hard token. We can mix and match those across the company. We can choose those. I can have all of those as options. So even if I'm someplace where I don't have, maybe I've got my backup phone because my app or my regular phone broke, but I need to sign in, I can still do that by, requesting an SMS text. I can really do that across the multitude of different options. But multi-factor really does, when we start combining it with different things, like we were talking about the single sign-on and the self-service, that information really helps us protect ourselves against unauthorized access, right? Somebody gets your password, they can't log in as you. They might be guessing your password, they might have phished you for your password, you might have even given it to somebody, but that information is no good unless you actually authorize it using the application. So really a huge way of layering the security on that.
Yeah, Gerald, the other thing that I think is important to note around multi-factor authentication is that some of the recent exploits that have been out there, like the Intel exploits against processors, where there's a way to potentially gain access or the data of your username and password. Well, your systems could be completely vulnerable to that, but if you're using multi-factor authentication, it doesn't really matter because you have to have another device or another thing that requires for authentication. So this is one of the ways that even if your identity gets compromised or your username and password gets compromised, some of those kind of things, this, through phishing or other attempts, this still protects you. This provides that other layer that hackers aren't going to be able to get.
Correct.
All right, so we're coming around the final section here, the last around Protect Plus. And this is a unique one that people might think, well, why does custom branding matter? So Gerald, let's talk about that.
So custom branding allows us to actually take your O365 pages and actually add your company's logo, mission statements, different pieces of unique information, even background images that completely change it. So when you're logging into O365, it doesn't look the same as it normally does. It automatically immediately identifies it as your company's access. And so what that does is bad guys out there, they're getting sneaky. And as they're trying to phish you for this information, they're building fake O365 sign-in sites and then convincing you to go to them. They can then, because everybody uses the same format, they can get a majority of those people. But if your staff knows that as soon as I enter my username, it should automatically change to a different look, and that new look should look like my company's information. A hacker's not going to go through the trouble most of the time in order to gain access to you, to make to find out what your pages look like and to get all those logos and various things like that. They're going to go after the mass group of people. So this is kind of a way of helping protect yourself against those identity thefts, the CEO fraud type attacks, the phishing, spear phishing, all the credential harvesting type ideas that you hear out there.
And it's a simple way. I mean, I think it adds some professionalism to your organization, but it also then does have a nice additional layer of protection, so that it gives your staff pause if they happen to accidentally click on that link and then they realize, wait a second, this isn't my company's page, so I'm not going to enter my credentials. So it's a nice little extra layer of protection, add some professionalism to your organization, and it's just a nice extra component that you can build into your O365 portfolio. Well, with that said, I definitely want to say thanks everyone for joining us as we hit on these 5 ways to empower and protect your team. You can't get rid of the old traditional security layers. They are still important, but as we've articulated and given lots of examples of why it's no longer enough because of the new threats that are out there, as well as to enable your team to be empowered, educated, protect them, and realize that we're going to presume breach, because there's some threats that the only way you can protect yourself against is to have a good backup to enable recovery, and then some of the additional features available with SecureWorker Plus. So together, they combine with these 2 programs, our SecureWorker and SecureWorker Plus program, in addition to the regular security layers that we've already had out there for well over a decade. And love you to touch base with us. We'd love to show you, and as well as the attendees, if you're clients, we already have rolled some of these solutions out in the trial. If you are not a client at the moment, attendees of this session are also eligible for a free 30-day trial of the intelligent threat detection. So we'd be happy to work with you on that. And for all of you, those of you who are in Minnesota, we have an event coming up on April 3rd that we'd like to remind everyone about, TwinCitiesTechPulse.com. And for our Colorado clients and folks, we do have a culture event coming up in April, towards the end of April, where we're going to be talking about you don't want that puppy, it's damaged goods. So love for you to learn what that's about. It's an engaging part that's a part of Mytech culture that we love to share with everyone. Finally, thanks a lot everybody for attending. Gerald, thank you so much for walking us through that. Lee for adding additional commentary. And we are tired of security scare tactics, and that's why we wanted to provide you 5 ways to empower and protect your team moving forward. Thank you all very much, and enjoy your day.